We're recording the interview of Loghan Young. This interview is being conducted by Erica Carter from the Wright State University Veterans Voices Project. This interview is being recorded at Wright State University in the New Media Incubator Center. It is 4:52 p.m. on October 30th, 2018. Hi, Loghan.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm so good. So good. When and where were you born?
I was born in Dayton, Ohio in September 17th of 1988.
Who are your parents and what were their occupations?
My mom was Robin Swimer, and she was a bartender most of my life and a stay-at-home mom. And my dad was did random jobs, but he's currently a truck driver. So.
Bartender for a mom.
Yeah. Oh, and his name's David.
David, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, David. Any siblings?
I do. I have an older brother, Alan, and a younger sister, Reagan.
Did either of them join the military?
No.
No, okay. What were you doing before you entered the service?
I was working at a beauty supply store called Cosmoprof, and I was loving my job there. However, I could feel like I was going nowhere, and I was trying to go to school. I think I was at Sinclair Community College, and I just was working and going to school.
What were you going to school for?
I was going to school for aiming to go to law school, so I was criminal justice, I guess.
Okay. And when you, before you went to school, did you have any hobbies in high school or?
No, we moved a lot growing up. For whatever reason, my parents, we lived in almost a different house every couple years, and I went to a different school district almost every grade. So we moved a lot. So there wasn't a whole lot of time for finding hobbies or anything like that. So.
Okay, so that leads me into another question.
Okay.
Did that make your transition of moving in the military easier or harder?
Definitely made it easier. I was excited to be able to move more. I was happy to do so. I was hoping to travel as much as possible and get as many duty stations as possible.
Okay, now I'm going to assume from your shirt that you were in the Army.
I was active duty Army.
Why did you choose that branch?
It was kind of an accident. Originally I knew a guy from high school that had joined the Navy, so I was like, Navy sounds nice. So I walked into the Navy recruiting office and told them I want to join the Navy. And they're like, okay, well, take this test on the computer here. So I take the test. And
what test?
I guess it was like a pre-test for the ASVAB to see if you would do decent. So I took it on the computer and they're like, oh yeah, you're good to go. Sign up here. Here's your date for the ASVAB. So I go, I take the ASVAB, and I bombed it because no one told me I was supposed to study or what they were testing or anything. So I did terrible. I think I needed like a 36 to at least just get in. I think I got a 34. And yeah, it was bad. It
sound like Army standards.
Yeah. So that leads me to my next point. So as I bomb it for the Navy's like, oh, well, come back and take it in a couple months. I'm like, I don't have a couple months. I want to go now. Here comes the Army recruiter, pops his head out and says, would you get on your ASVAB? I said, a 34. He said, oh, yeah, we'll take you right now. I said, oh, sold. I originally knocked on the Air Force's door, but they were never there, ever. And I would call, leave voicemails, email, nothing. Everybody's like, oh, it's like a year wait anyway. And I was like, okay, maybe it is. The Marines was just never an option because it sounded intimidating. I just always heard stereotypes. So I was like, I'm good on the Marines. So Navy, then Army lured me in. They're like, oh yeah, we can get you out of here in the next couple weeks. And I was like, okay, I'll take that one. So he showed me a highlight video of 2 jobs I could be. I could either be a cook or I could be a driver. And I was like, okay, well, I'm definitely not going to be a cook. That sounds terrible. And they're like, yeah, we don't have that many women that are truck drivers, so that'd be really cool. And, you know, you're really small, though. I don't know if you could do it. And I was like, oh, I could do it. So they showed me these videos of you know, the trucks like the LMTVs driving through, you know, fields and off-roading it and whatever. And I'm like, okay, I like driving. I mean, how hard can driving be? So I picked 88 Mike was my MOS, so I was a truck driver. And yeah, I was excited to go into trucking. And at the recruiting station, they actually practice PT for you to get ready for one, you could move up a rank. If you scored pretty high on your PT test before you joined, you could earn the rank of an E2 versus an E1. So I did that, and I got a pretty decent score. I don't really recall what it was. I think it was around a 250 or something. And then, so I took the PT test for the Army, and every day they had us doing training for basic training. So that really helped me prepare what basic training, the physicality of it was going to be like. So.
Okay, for the record, guys, that 250 was out of 300, so that was pretty good. So good job, you. Kudos.
Thanks.
You're at the recruiter. They prepare you for. I've never heard of that before, so I'm very, very happy for you. I was all of 18 when I joined. It would have been nice,
right?
If I could have, but worked out.
Yeah, it was extremely helpful to have that.
And then you were kind of prepared, so you get to basic.
Right.
Tell me about it.
I think MEPS was more intimidating almost than basic because it was kind of the first night away from home, really, and like it's real. You're going in the morning, you know, you have this itinerary, you know, you get all checked out, so it was just very legit is how it felt. So, and then I'm saying bye to my family, so it was kind of surreal going to MEPS and staying in a hotel and having this meal voucher, and I'm just like, wow, what am I doing? So then I don't have as good memory as I would like, but I went to Fort Jackson, South Carolina for basic training, and I went September 23rd. I had just turned 21 on September 17th, so September 23rd, I go to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and I remember the in-processing station, I guess you would call it. I just remember bits and pieces of it. I remember a lot of cleaning, a lot of sitting around doing nothing, and I remember them not letting us sleep like the first 3 days. And I'm like, oh God, I'm never gonna make it because I need my sleep. So that was really hard. That was the hardest adjustment initially, was not being allowed to sleep. I mean, as soon as you doze off, they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I don't know, I was sleeping, you know? So that was intimidating, and they're doing all these checks, you know, dental work and et cetera, and I'm like, man, they're really like checking us out, make sure we're good. So that was weird, and then I was kind of excited for them to issue us our uniforms, so I couldn't wait for them to do that, and they finally did. And so I was excited to get my uniform for the first time and my, you know, green duffel bag full of clothes. And then, you know, we don't get to call home or anything. We just call and say we're there. And then they put us on a bus, and we have to take us to our basic training. So we have to, like, sit in the bus like this with our head down. So that was interesting. I'm like, why is that? You know, where are they taking us? So that was kind of scary. And they're just yelling the whole time on the bus, and people are crying. And I'm like, man, this is weird. So we get to, my unit was 134, and it was Alpha Company. And we get there, we go upstairs into this huge bay, and everybody is kind of toeing the line, so we're all lined up around the perimeter of the room. And then they start just yelling at us and, you know, telling us to drop and do push-ups, and it's all this like physical exercise already. And I'm like, wow, we just walked in the door, you know, there's no briefing or nothing. So then we start picking our duffel bag up and putting it over our head and putting it back down, and I'm like, oh my God, like how am I gonna keep doing this over and over and over? So he keeps doing it, and just when I thought I was gonna collapse, he stopped and switched to a different exercise. And then I don't really remember how it worked out like that after that. I just remember getting smoked a lot. They love the prone row, which I hated a lot, and mountain climbers. The prone row, where you lay on your stomach and you have your arms and your feet up, so you're using all your core, and then we balanced our rifle on our hands. Oh, wow. So we're holding up our rifle with just our hands laying down. It was awful. I hated it. Made my arms really strong, though. I remember being so hungry. I loved MREs. I thought they were the best thing ever. I guess I was just that hungry. So I would eat all of mine and then some. My friends that had extra, I'm like, I'll take that, I'll take that. I have a high metabolism, so I was always hungry. And I remember the first time we go to the chow hall, and they're like, you have 2 minutes to eat. And I'm like, 2 minutes? I chew really slow, so I'm freaking out that I'm not gonna get enough to eat, so I'm trying to eat as fast as I possibly can. And they're like, you're done. And I'm like, oh man. And then the first time I ever tried to get juice was terrible. I got yelled at. They were like, "Why are you drinking juice?" And then I'm like, "Okay, sorry, I won't drink it." And he's like, "No, you're drinking it." So I had to drink all the juice, and it was really awkward. I'm like, okay. And I got partnered with this girl instantly. Her name was Wagner, and she was very fragile. She was a Cali girl, and she just was crying nonstop. And I just remember always telling her, "Wagner, quit crying." And she's like, "I'm just sorry." So, of course, she was a lot, I don't want to say weaker, but, you know, she was just emotionally a mess, basically. So, and I mean, she couldn't do the physical stuff as much, so we were battle buddies. So, of course, everything she did wrong, I got in trouble for. She was falling asleep all the time in class, so we'd both get smoked. But she was awesome. She's still a really good friend of mine to this day. And I met another girl named Smith. So the three of us were battle buddies and still are. We still talk and everything. And they're definitely how I got through basic training. I got severely dehydrated. We went on like a 13-mile ruck march at the end. And I got severely dehydrated and had to go to the hospital. And I was so scared they were going to reset me. But they didn't, thank God, because I got out the very next day. But I got yelled at the whole time I was in the hospital. I'm getting IVs, and they're like, "You can't do this ever again. You have to drink water. You can't be dehydrated on the battlefield." And I'm like, sorry. I mean, I was drinking water all day. So
Now, who was yelling at you?
everybody that would pass me, like doctors, nurses, random drill sergeants would walk by and be like, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "I came in because I'm dehydrated." And they're like, "That's the wrong answer," and just yelling at me. So, I mean, anybody who felt like yelling at somebody was yelling at me. So yeah, but I mean, basic was fun. It was the best time that I had. Like, it was, even though it was stressful, it was really cool. I mean, just the camaraderie. I'm like, okay, this is what I've been looking for, you know, this is what I was hoping it would be like. So it really put things into perspective that I did the right thing by joining.
And how long was basic?
I think it was 9 weeks. Yeah. Yep.
Okay. 9 weeks of basic, you made it through it, you're
Yep.
happy. New friends, lifelong friends. What
Yep.
year is it?
2009. Yep.
2009. And that means you joined when we were not at peace.
Right.
And that was okay with you?
I mean, I don't know that it was okay. I knew in my head as soon as I joined I would deploy. But at that point in my life, I felt like I had nothing to lose. I just, like I said, I was working and going to school, but it felt like I wasn't getting anywhere. And I just felt so alone in my life. I had a young son at the time. I think he was 3 or 4. And it was just hard. And my family, my parents had split up. I had a teenage sister. Just life was a mess. And I just felt alone. So I'm like, I mean, I have nothing to lose, for one. For two, I can be a part of something. And that was the biggest thing that I was searching for, is to be a part of something. And when I went to basic and met my 2 battles, and just how basic was, and how people just leaned on each other, and how we all got smoked together and we celebrated together, I was like, man, yes, this is exactly what I was looking for. So the deploying part, I guess, was just one of the few cons that I saw, and I was like, it is what it is. Yeah.
So let's talk about AIT.
Okay.
School training.
So I went to my truck driver school training.
Where?
Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, the ugliest place on earth. I hate that place so much. It was December when I arrived, like mid-December, or I think maybe early December, because I remember having Thanksgiving at Fort Jackson. I was really disappointed because people's family could come, but my family lived all the way in Ohio, so they couldn't drive all the way down there just to have Thanksgiving with me and go home. So I was really upset about that. But so I went to AIT about mid-December, early December, and it was freezing. It was so cold. And it was awful there. I think AIT was way worse than basic training. I hated it. Every minute of it, I hated it. But I did have a couple friends that had came with me from basic to AIT. There was this one girl, she was Russian. Her name was Popovich. And she was awesome. She was just so positive all the time, and she was just so strong. She ended up being our platoon leader. Like, she was really cool. So I hung out with her a lot. Yeah. AIT was way worse, and luckily, as soon as I got to AIT, it was around Christmas time, so I got to go home for 2 weeks, and then I had to go back to AIT, which was both good and bad. I came home from AIT and got married. I actually married a guy that was at the recruiting station with me, who did PT with me every day. And then when I left, we decided to keep it going, and he wrote me letters every day in basic and sent me care packages, and he came to my graduation, and so it was kind of like love at first sight. So then when I came home from AIT, we got married, and then when I went back to AIT in January after the holidays, it sucked. It was really hard, like getting married and then just having to go back to training like that, and then being with family, and then having to transition back into training. Not to mention it was so cold. It was so cold. It was -50, and it was like a record day. It was -50, and they had us outside shoveling snow, so we'd have to rotate 10 minutes out, 10 minutes in, and all I can remember about AIT was it was so cold. And all the, I guess they were not drill sergeants, but all of our senior NCOs were just so much more strict, and they were dicks.
Oh my.
Yeah, I didn't like any of them at all. Like, at least my drill sergeants, there were some that I really liked, but AIT, I just hated every bit of it.
Okay.
It sucked.
So I got a girl question.
Yeah.
It's not a female field,
Right.
like maybe cooking, or what was your ratio of boys to girls?
So it was actually higher than I thought, during training at least. I mean, there was probably a good 60 of us, I would say. So in an entire platoon, it was almost 50-50. Like, yeah, there was a lot of females. I had heard, of course, before I joined, that there had been a bonus for people that would sign up as a truck driver, so I don't know if that helped increase the ratio of women. But there were a lot of women in there, surprisingly, at AIT at least.
Okay.
Yeah.
As a mechanic, I didn't have that luck.
Yeah.
There were 6 of us compared to
well,
the
and
200.
you joined like
before you.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we won't talk about how early, but yeah.
Okay. So I got a few backup questions
Okay.
just to tail back. So you met your husband while training.
Right.
That means he was in the military too.
Yes.
How was he able to pop into your graduation? Were you guys training at the same place?
No, so he was, I think it was delayed entry program. He was a small arms repair, so they couldn't get him an opening in basic until May of the following year. So when I left in September, he hadn't even got his date yet for small arms repair basic training or whatever. They hadn't had any slots available. So he was able, luckily, to be there for me for my basic training graduation, and then come to AIT on, he would actually drive all the way down to Fort Leonard Wood from Ohio and visit me when we'd have a weekend pass. So he'd basically sit in a hotel all by himself until I was allowed to get released, and then I would come and hang out for a little bit and then go back. So we did that for a while until May, when he finally went to basic.
And were you in your, how long was AIT?
I think it was around 10 weeks. It was similar to basic training. It was between 9 and 12 weeks. I want to say like 10 weeks. It wasn't that long.
So you were full-time active duty by the time he started?
Yes. I'd already got to my first duty station and everything by the time he went to basic training.
Which was?
Which was what?
Where?
My first duty station. It was Fort Sill, Oklahoma. 75th Fires Brigade, 117. HSB was my company. So.
Okay. A few more questions.
Yeah.
Your family care plan, I don't think that's something that a lot of civilians understand, is when you join the military, you have to have a family care plan in case something happens to you. Was that easy for you to establish before you went in and then keep?
Yes and no. So, like I had said, my mom's life was kind of a mess. She had a teenager, and she was going through a divorce with my dad after 20 years. And then my brother was just off in his own world because he's older than me. So my son, his dad's mom is who I ended up signing custody over to, because as a single female, I had to sign over custody.
Completely?
Yes. So I gave her custody, which was hard, but also I felt like I was doing the right thing. So So I signed over custody to her, and then she maintained custody throughout my military career.
Okay. Was his father a part of his life?
Not really.
Okay. But yay, Grandma.
Yeah.
Okay.
She was awesome.
Okay. First duty station. It sounds like you adjusted pretty well to military life.
Surprisingly, I think, like I said, at just the point in my life, I was just, like nothing else can break me. I'm already at rock bottom. Everything else has got to be up from here. So I think the military actually just helped shape me in a more positive way than anything. I mean, it gave me that camaraderie. I found a husband. So I think it was more positive than it was negative, so it was easier for me to accept the harshness of the military that, some people may be not as accustomed to.
What happens when you get to your first duty station?
So
married and alone.
Yeah. So my husband and I, when I got orders, he was actually with me because he was visiting me on a pass. And so I got a call that I got my orders, and or I got word that my orders were in. So we went and picked them up. And my husband's from Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and he moved up to Ohio. His brother is Air Force, so he's stationed here. So he joined up here to up his odds of getting away from Oklahoma. And he's like, I don't care where we go as long as it's not Fort Sill. Our first and only duty station was Fort Sill, Oklahoma. So he almost threw up when we got our orders because he was really upset. I was kind of excited. I'd barely even heard of Oklahoma. And his dad lived there, and his dad was a retired drill sergeant. So I'm like, can't be that bad. So we flew on a plane together to Oklahoma, and we called his dad, which he hadn't spoken to his dad in a while. So he called his dad like, hey, I'm married, my wife's in the Army, and she just got orders to Oklahoma, so we get in at this time. Can you pick us up from the airport? So he did, and so I met his dad for the first time. We'd only been married for like 6 months. And then we ended up staying at a hotel for like a week because we couldn't find housing or something. I don't remember the issue necessarily, but we lived in a hotel room for a week, so that was different. And then we finally got an apartment together, and we just had a futon, a coffee table, and a laptop. That was it. So we stayed there, and when I had to report, I think I got there on like a Friday, so I had the whole weekend, and then Monday I had to report to my unit. So I was so terrified that when I reported to my unit that they were going to try to make me stay in the barracks. And my husband's like, that's not how the military works. You're married. They can't make you stay in the barracks. I'm like, they can do whatever they want. They're the Army. And he's like, no, I'm telling you. So I nervously walk up to my first duty station, and, I'm like, I'm Private Young. I'm here for this, yada, yada. And they're like, okay, follow back up, formations at this time. And I'm like, oh, they didn't make me stay. And he's like, told you. So, but before that, I just feel like this is an important detail for people to know. When I got married on R&R, well, I guess it wasn't R&R, but on Christmas break, and then I came back to AIT, they did not want me to get approved for the dual military program, and they did not want me to change my name. They refused to call me my married name. I don't know why they were so mad about it. They just assumed my husband and I were getting married for the pay, which that's none of their business anyway, if that was the reason. But so I had to go all on my own and like sneak out of training and kind of sneak around and do some investigating on how we could be in the dual military program and how I could get my name changed. And it was just a headache, and it was the most annoying thing ever. So AIT was all bad. But so I get to my unit, and I'm Private Young now. No one can take that from me. I have paperwork. And me and my husband did finally get into the dual military program. And I think like the first week or two we were there, we had a FRG meeting where I first really got to meet the commander and the first sergeant, and they're talking about a deployment. So they're like, there's a rumor that we may deploy, it's up in the air. So that was stressful from the beginning because I knew we were going to deploy, but nobody was really owning that. So then we got official, I think like a couple weeks later, we got official orders that yes, we were deploying. And then at that time, my husband got sent to basic training, which I think was in May. So then I start preparing for the deployment with my unit. We started doing field exercises, packing connexes, all kinds of stuff. And so I'm just relaying this information to my husband via letter because he was in basic training. So that was really stressful, not knowing if I'd be able to talk to him and tell him that I'm leaving and not be able to spend my last few minutes or days with him before I deploy. So that was probably the most stressful part of everything.
Of your career? Of your military career?
Maybe not in my career. It started off the most stressful thing. So.
Okay. Can you say what a FRG is?
I don't know.
I forget what the acronym means.
Me too, but I know Family Readiness. FRG?
Yeah.
Family Readiness Group?
I think that sounds familiar.
Maybe? Yeah, that sounds about right. I know
Yeah.
it's Family Readiness something, so we'll Google the G later.
Okay. Conics are packed, all loaded up. How do you get to where you're going? Where are you going?
So we're going to Kabul, Afghanistan. We had official orders. So when my husband went to basic training, I used my orders to break my lease because I'm not going to live in an apartment by myself for no reason. So I actually moved in with my new father-in-law. So that was kind of cool. It gave us a chance to bond and get to know each other better and that sort of thing. And he kind of loved me instantly. He was excited that his son married somebody that was active duty Army, given that he was active duty Army and a drill sergeant and everything. So I lived with him while we were gearing up to deploy. And then I came home. We had like a leave before we deploy, so I got to come back to Ohio and visit my family by myself, which was kind of weird now that I was married and I was coming to Ohio by myself and saying bye to my family. I don't think my family realized really what was going on. I never even told my mom that I was thinking of joining the Army. I just joined, and then after I signed the papers, I was like, I joined the Army, I leave on this date, sorry. And she cried. So, but when I came home before I deployed, it just was kind of normal. Like there wasn't anything like a farewell or anything like that, which was fine, but looking back, that's kind of weird, you know, I guess during that time of war. So then I came back to my unit, and then we actually deployed on July 4th, which was very patriotic. And we left, I think, in the middle of the night. And I think from Fort Sill, we went to Maine or something like that. I know it was like far north, northeast. And then I think from Maine, we went to Romania. And then from Romania, I think we went to Kazakhstan. And then from Kazakhstan, I think we went straight to Kabul. No, we went to Bagram first and then Kabul. But I think that was the transition. Romania was weird. It's the first time I'd ever been in a foreign country. Maine was also kind of weird. I'd never really left Ohio. I lived in Ohio and Florida, but Maine was weird because there were all these like World War II vets and Vietnam vets there, like thanking us and kind of celebrating us, which I thought was kind of weird. That was interesting. And then when I got to Romania, it was the first time I'd ever been in a foreign country, and that was weird. And we were just at the airport, and I remember calling my husband. I think his drill sergeant, he told his drill sergeant that he was allowed, that his wife was deploying to Afghanistan, so his drill sergeant gave him a phone number for me to call, letting him know like my transition, so I made it okay. So that was really nice of him. So I called him from Romania. It cost me $50 to talk to him for like 5 minutes. So that was expensive. And then when I got to Kazakhstan, seems like everything in the military happens in the middle of the night. Everywhere you go, you get there in the middle of the night. So that was frustrating. But so we get to Kazakhstan, is an Air Force base there, and it's the middle of the night. And I remember being really scared because I'm in a foreign country and we're on a bus and we have no ammo. We don't have our weapons or anything. So that just made me feel uneasy. And we're on like a school bus and we're just like driving through a neighborhood. So I'm like, how safe is Kazakhstan? I've never even heard of this place. Like, we're just on a bus with no weapons or anything. I mean, sure, there was a convoy with us, but I don't know. So it was really unsettling for me. And then we get to the base, and that's the first time I'd ever seen like a FOB, like a foreign operating base. So that was weird. It was huge. Then they had like a bar there, and the Air Force was allowed to drink like 1 beer a night, or like, you know, they got one beer allotment certain times or whatever. So that was weird. They're doing karaoke and they're having fun, and I'm like, well, I guess deployments can't be that bad. So we stayed in Kazakhstan for a while. I think we were there like a week. And then after we left there, we went to Bagram, and I was really scared when I got to Bagram because I got there, again, no weapons, no ammo. So that just really had me uneasy. I'm like, we're going into war, yet I have no way to defend myself. So that was worrisome for me. And then when I really realized this was real and I had my freak out moment, I had to bring myself back to reality. I'm sleeping in this huge tent. It's so hot. It's July, so it's like 100 degrees. And I just feel hot air blowing on me, and we're just waiting around for all of our stuff to get there and everything to get settled at Kabul. So we're just waiting around. I think we're in Bagram for like a week as well. And then I'm laying down in the bunk bed, and I'm actually kind of like laying with my weapon. So I think they had just issued us the weapon, just no ammo, that's what it was. So I'm laying with my weapon, and I fall asleep, and I wake up to the prayer music, the Afghan prayer music. And I woke up so shaken because I'd never heard prayer music, first of all. And second of all, I just felt so uneasy. And shortly after, the sirens go off that we're being attacked. So I just kind of freak out for a minute, like, what am I doing? I'm in a foreign country. I have no ammo. How am I going to make it here for a year? And so actually at this time, another female battle buddy that was in my unit came in, and she's like, what's wrong? I was like, I'm freaking out. How are we going to do this? You know, and she's like, calm down. And so it was like a movie. She kind of like slapped me and was like, chill out. I'm like, okay. And then after that, I mean, it was fine. It was weird. It's like I just had to break down for a minute and accept what was happening. And then after that, I never was scared or freaked out again my entire deployment. So that was kind of weird.
It had to be weird.
Yeah, it was weird. I guess I just needed a
moment. You were a truck driver.
Yeah. I guess I didn't really I understood what that meant. I don't know. I just needed that one moment to freak out. And then after that, I was like, it is what it is. I'm here. You know, it's in God's hands or somebody's hands, and I'll either make it or I won't. And hopefully if I don't, it's quick, you know. So I'd really accepted I was there to do a mission. I need to keep everyone safe, and I need to do my job. I need to just focus on my job is kind of what kept me going. Is I just need to focus on my job, and I need to take this seriously. And the word complacency had kept going around. And I told myself almost every day, I will not get complacent. I will not get complacent. And I just remember thinking that the entire deployment, that I won't let myself get complacent. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
When do you get ammo?
So finally when we get to, I think right before we head to Kabul, I think we got ammo. I don't really remember. A lot of the deployment is really fuzzy for me. I don't know why. But I want to say we got it before we got on this armored bus, which was weird. So we took an armored bus from Bagram to Kabul, which was, I want to say, anywhere from an hour to a 3-hour drive. The timeline is fuzzy, but I know with Afghanistan traffic and et cetera, it could have taken anywhere from an hour to 3 hours. So
you guys are just in regular traffic with people driving around?
Yeah. But we have a convoy with us.
Okay. Few questions.
Yeah.
Is this your whole unit, and how big is your unit? Because I
think it was my whole unit, and I want to say anywhere from. So we were kind of spread in Afghanistan. I think some of us went to Kabul and some of us went to Kandahar, and I think it was about 100 of us. I want to say roughly.
So more than one bus.
So those of us, I don't know what happened to guys that went to Kandahar. Like once we got to Bagram, I didn't see them until we came home. So the guys that were at Camp Dubs with me, which is where I was, I guess, stationed in Afghanistan, we were, I think just one bus. I think there was just one bus of us because they're going to different places. Camp Phoenix was another location that people went, which now that I recall, I think we went to Camp Phoenix after Bagram. So Bagram, then Camp Phoenix, then Camp Dubs, which Camp Dubs was maybe about 10 miles distance from Camp Phoenix, I want to say. And that was kind of a larger fob. I mean, it had like restaurants and DFAC and lots of people. Camp Dubs was very small. We just had a tent for chow and maybe about 50 bee huts, and that was it. And that's where the higher-ups were stationed. So my first sergeant, my commander, the XO, and that's where the convoy drivers were stationed, which was myself, and I think we had 4 trucks. So I think our team, I think, was 15 people, and a warrant officer is who led the convoys, which we were PSD, Personal Security Detail, I believe. So he was in charge of us, so.
Okay. Restaurants. Now I'm just getting off topic.
I was going to say, the only one I remember is Green Bean Cafe, which is like a coffee shop.
Okay.
And that was at Phoenix, and that was the only thing.
Okay, I don't remember restaurants. They had like Burger King and a Cinnabon.
Oh no, we didn't have that at all.
At
Phoenix, no.
No.
Phoenix was smaller than that. Like I said, Green Bean, I think, was, I guess, what I meant by restaurants.
Okay.
Because it was almost like a mall in one building. Very, very small mall, not anything so one store, a PX, and a Green Bean. That was the mall. So, and then they had an actual DFAC, like a huge cafeteria, so.
Okay. So it's about 15 of you. You arrived to, what's their nickname that you said?
Camp Phoenix or Camp Dubs.
Camp Dubs.
Yeah.
You arrived to Camp Dubs. You get situated in your bee hut.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any female battle buddies?
Not any that was assigned to me directly. There was only one other female on the convoy with me, so it was just me and another female on the PSD team. Then the other females, I think there were only like 8 total females in my unit that had deployed, and they were most of them were at Camp Phoenix. So, yeah, it was just me and another girl that was at Camp Dubs. So I guess that was my only battle buddy.
What was your living arrangement like?
So when we first got there, we shared a bee hut with the National Guard unit that was there. So it was this wooden bee hut, and it was, I think, like, I want to say like 8 rooms maybe, lined up on each side. And they were small. Like, it fit a bunk bed and then like 10 feet. That was it. So we just had our bunk bed, and then we had like a tough box, and that was really all that would fit in there. So the living arrangements were tight, and it was difficult at first because the National Guard worked nights, so they slept all day. So we had to be extremely quiet. We could never turn on the lights. So until we got everything rolling, which, I mean, getting our convoys going. The first, I think, 3 months of the deployment, we kind of just sat around waiting for all of our equipment to come in, our trucks to come in. We had to go back up to Bagram to do our in-country convoy training for all of the convoy drivers, so that was another 40-hour course. And then we ended up driving our trucks back home, I think, after we got certified. So the first 3 months, we just laid around and kind of did training, went to the gym, watched movies, read books, kind of did a lot of waiting on our equipment. And then once we got our equipment, then we started going on convoys.
How different was the 40-hour in-country convoy training to AIT?
It was really different Missouri is kind of hilly anyway. There's hills there, but there wasn't a lot of off-base training for AIT. So we only went outside the base once and went down and around a mountain one time. So that was kind of weird, and the rest was kind of a simulator, like a deployment simulator where you're kind of in a video game almost. That was pretty realistic, come to find out. In the simulator, you drive up a mountain and you can't see anything, and the hydraulics lift you up, and then if you fall off the mountain, it tilts you. So I actually did drive up a mountain, and that's exactly what it feels like. All you can see is the sky. So that was a really scary moment, worrying about driving off this mountain. But luckily, my gunner could kind of see a little better, so he kind of helped guide where my tires were. He's, like, keep your tires straight, don't turn them this way, do turn them this way. So that kind of helped me navigate a little better than just looking up and praying. So
Follow the North Star.
Yeah, yeah.
Tell me about the people in your vehicle.
So it was me, I was the driver, a warrant officer, he was our TC, and then a medic and a gunner. And the four of us, we were battle buddies. We didn't leave each other's side. We went everywhere together. We ate together. We hung out together. We went to the gym together. We didn't leave each other's side the entire years-long deployment. So we were pretty close.
Okay. Are there any specific memories that you have about any particular trip that you went on, or any special?
I mean, there's a couple different ones. I remember my very first convoy. I started off as the rear vehicle rather than the lead vehicle, and that was my very first convoy. And I just remember the anticipation of leaving the gates, what it was going to be like. And I just remember, thinking I got this, and I'm scanning, and I'm thinking of all my training, and I'm scanning the road, looking for anything that looks unusual, and I'm paying attention to the truck, and I'm keeping my proximity, and just following them like I'm supposed to. And it was intense. I remember feeling the intensity. It was intense. So that was my first convoy, and then once we made it safely there and back, I was like, I did it. So then I eventually worked my way up to front convoy driver, and I liked being lead truck a lot better because I wasn't just following. I was the one, determining the route, determining how we're going to turn, and I felt like I was pretty good at my job. I never had hit a vehicle or done anything that messed up the rest of the convoy or anything like that. So I really liked it. I took a lot of pride in being the lead convoy truck. It was also a lot of pressure because I'm responsible for everybody behind me. If I follow a bad path or if I take a corner too sharp and a truck tips or something, it's on me. So everything is on my shoulders. So that was pretty intense. The terrain was interesting. It was, dirt roads and no traffic lights. There are ANA, Afghan Army, that kind of would hold their hand up and try to be like a traffic cop, but the local traffic didn't care at all. They would just do whatever they wanted. So that was interesting.
And scary, right?
Yeah, it was scary because, the ROE, you have to think about vehicles approaching you and how close they get to you and what you do if they do that. We also had locals throw stuff at us a lot, like rocks or anything they could find, vegetables, whatever. So they would throw stuff at us a lot, and then we'd have to, decide if it was a threat or not. Being in traffic was really stressful, which happened a lot. We went to Phoenix a lot, Camp Phoenix, which I said was about 10 miles, but it would nearly take us anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour to get there just because traffic was so bad. And they had downtown Kabul that was, in my mind, I think of Times Square just because the buildings are really close together. I've never been to New York, but from what I can see, the buildings are just really close together. There's bumper-to-bumper traffic. There are people all over, and it just looks like chaos. So that was very unsettling going into those sort of situations and just sitting there in traffic, waiting, hoping. You're a gigantic target. So sitting and waiting, is somebody going to do something stupid today? Is a car going to purposely drive into us? Are we going to hit an IED? It was really stressful, but like I said, I just continued to tell myself, don't get complacent, keep looking for the threat, and so every convoy, I'm looking for a threat. And there was a lot of protest. Some of them would be violent, and we would have to change our route mid-route. We would get intel that there's a protest happening, so we'd have to reroute. And then I remember the first time that a V-bed went off when I was driving. That was interesting. So when we're coming home, there's what's used to be called the King's Palace, and so it's a gigantic building that is kind of blocking our direct view to our fob. So the King's Palace is here, and then you would come around, kind of go around a corner like that, and then you'd go in this way, and this was the entrance to our fob. So we're coming around the king's palace, and then all of a sudden my ears start ringing. I'm feeling these vibrations, and we just have no idea what just happened. And so we lose comms for a second, and then we're all on the radio, like, all we can see is smoke. So we're like, is our rear
Behind you or in front of you?
Everywhere. Like, I
Oh.
couldn't see in front of me or behind me.
Okay.
But I'm hearing my ears ring. I'm feeling like my body's vibrating, and I can't hear comms. So we finally get comms back, and we're like, rear truck, are you good? And so they finally respond. They're like, we're good. It's not us. And so we're looking like, is it us? Did we get hit? Who hit it's got to be an IED. Who hit it? So we're all looking, all trucks are checking in like, no, we're good. And we're like, what the hell? What just happened? So we finally make it around the corner, which, I mean, I want to say is pretty close, maybe 50 feet in front of us. A V-bed had went off, and they had tried to, there was a convoy coming out of the gate, and they had tried to detonate when the two of us that convoy was coming out, we were coming in, so they were trying to detonate to get both of us.
To maximum.
Right. So they were trying to get two convoys at once with a single V-bed.
What's a V-bed?
It's something like IED. I don't remember the definition of the acronym. Vehicle, I don't know. I don't remember.
Okay, so it kind of try to explain it to me. There are people in a vehicle and they make it explode, or they leave the vehicle and then they run off and detonate it?
It's an IED on wheels. It's an IED on wheels.
But people they're going to kill, they're suicidal.
So there's a suicide bomber driving a car packed full of explosive. Yeah, so that's one thing as a convoy driver you look for, cars that are sitting really low to the ground that look heavy, because obviously explosive are heavy. So that's one thing you look for, cars that are really low to the ground. And this guy had just, I guess he had started to approach the gate, and he had kind of parked, I'd say probably, I don't know, 100 feet outside the gate or so. And so the convoy and I are coming head on to each other, and then he detonated kind of, when we're pretty close together, but far enough apart to where we're not side by side. So luckily, he only injured himself. He ended up dying, the driver, obviously. But it was weird because it threw him out of the vehicle. So he was just the only one laying in the middle of the road. So that was weird. I'm not really sure how his body ended up outside the vehicle. I would have thought he would have
imploded.
Yeah, and I thought he would be in a million pieces, but he wasn't. Just his arm was in a really odd position and kind of like string cheese. So that was weird. The gunner of the convoy that was coming out, I think he had took some shrapnel to the face, but he was okay. He lived and everything. He didn't have any too severe wounds that I recollect. And so we stopped the convoy, and my TC dismounts the truck, and he's like, man the radio, I'm gonna go check this out, et cetera. So we actually see 3 guys standing on a building to my left, and they're on their cell phones, and that usually means they're calling in another attack, or they're reporting what's happened, or they're letting somebody know that we're an open target right now. So that was the first time I've ever had to kind of man the radio, especially in a hectic situation. I was trying to report what was going on to the talk, and trying to communicate with the other vehicles, and do all that. And from what I was told, I did pretty decent. So I did my job. I remained calm, and then we just kind of went about our day after that. I mean, we did like a debriefing, but I don't really remember what happened after that. I just remember everybody was okay and we were fine. And then I remember one night having to do foot patrols. There was a Queen's Palace that was right within our camp, so it was really close, walking distance. So we had NVGs. I think something happened that day. I can't really remember if it was that V-bed incident or another incident that led to us being on high alert, but we were on 24-hour duty doing foot patrols and watchtowers and et cetera, and we had our NVGs, and that's the first time I ever got to use NVGs. They're hard to look through. It's like when you wear glasses for the first time, you keep stepping and you're like missing the floor, so that was interesting. And so we walked the Queen's
NVGs?
Palace. Night vision goggles.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know what they mean.
Yeah. So that was interesting doing that. And then the second time that I remember something significant like that happen is, I guess, the most common thing that I remember was we went to Camp Phoenix, as we always did, but it was really early in the morning, I think like 6 or 6:30 in the morning, and just my gunner had stayed in the truck, but we always parked our vehicles right outside the gate when you enter the fob. So we always parked right outside the gate, and my gunner stayed in the truck, and then me, my TC, and the medic went to the chow hall to get breakfast. And then the gunner called us. We had cell phones at the time, and like Afghanistan cell phones. And the gunner called us and say, hey, there's some strange activity. You guys need to get to the trucks now. And we're like, okay. So we don't have any of our gear or anything. We just have our weapons on us, but all of our gear is in the truck because we didn't typically walk around the fob with our gear on. So we throw our food away. We start walking. We walk out of the DFAC. We start walking toward the truck, and then all of a sudden we pass the connexes and we can hear ammo pinging off the connexes. And we're like, oh crap, we need to hurry up and get to our gear. So then we start running, and then we get to the truck, we sling on our gear, and then at this time a suicide bomber comes through the gate and detonates his vest. So we're just getting our gear on and everything, so we get in the truck, and then a second one did right after that. And so we get the truck blocked in front of the gate so nobody else can get through the fob. So as the driver, I just pulled the truck up and sat in front of the gate and just waited. My medic dismounted because the guy that like checks IDs and stuff at the gate, he got some shrapnel to the leg, I believe. So my medic attended him, and then my TC dismounted and went up to the tower to try to fire back at the enemy. There was like a junkyard across the street, and they were shooting at us and all of that. So it felt like it took a really long time, but I guess it wasn't that long. And then we were just kind of positioned at the gate, hoping nothing else would happen. And then about this time, we saw like the special forces roll up, and they're basically like, "We got it from here." We're like, "Okay." And that was the day that I earned my cab. So that was interesting. It kind of sucked just being in the truck, just sitting there waiting. Like, okay, is another guy gonna come through? Are we doing the right thing? Should we push through the gate and do something else? So it kind of made me feel helpless just sitting there waiting, especially while 2 of my guys were outside the truck. So that was a weird feeling, kind of being helpless. But and then we went back to our fob that day, and then we had to give like a brief on what happened, and that was pretty much it.
Now, tell me about your guys. This is your force deployment, but they're senior enlisted. So had they seen other
One
deployments?
of them was senior enlisted. The other 3 of us were specialists together. I'd got promoted in country. So all 3 of us were specialists. The warrant officer was the only one that was senior enlisted. So what was the question? I'm sorry.
Did they have any prior deployments?
Yeah. So the gunner, which he was only, I think, 24, he'd already been to Iraq twice, I believe. So this was his 3rd deployment, and he was like 24. And then the warrant officer, I think he was only 27 or 28, and this was his 3rd deployment. He'd already been to Iraq twice. So I felt pretty confident being with them. They'd already been in country twice already, and they'd done similar jobs, convoy driving, etc. So I felt pretty invincible with them. And then my medic, he just carried himself like he knew everything anyway. So he was a pretty knowledgeable guy. So I felt pretty comfortable with them.
How's your husband doing?
So he's good.
During this time?
Okay, so he's in basic training in AIT my first half of the deployment. So I was able to, like I said, he was able to call me a couple times using his drill sergeant's phone because they kind of understood it was a rare situation. And there was a lot of tension between us just because, I don't know, I guess a deployment makes you irritable. So calling home was probably the most frustrating part of the deployment. I wanted to almost just fully submerge myself in the deployment and just stop everything else. Like, I didn't want anything to do with my home life, my husband, my kid, nothing. Because it seemed like every time I called home too, I mean, we're talking almost a 10-hour difference. So when my morning's starting, they're going to bed and vice versa. So that was irritating. Then there's a line for the phones, etc. So trying to get a hold of my son, and he's in someone else's custody, and he has school and this and that, it was so frustrating. I feel like every time I called, nobody answered the phone. So I felt alone, and it kind of messed with my emotions because I'm there. I'm like, I have a job to do. I need to feel nothing. I need to just be ready for everything and anything that's thrown at me. And then home life is kind of toying with my emotions. So I felt like it was really hard to balance the two. That was a lot harder than if I would have just severed myself from them completely and just focused on the deployment and then came home and tried to work on that. So that was rough. But I end up driving my company, or I think my brigade commander and command sergeant major, and they're like, you know, so what does your husband do, et cetera? And I'm like, well, actually, he's in AIT right now. And they're like, oh, so that means when you get home, he's going to deploy. I was like, I mean, probably, but we knew that was going to happen. And so they were like, well, do you want him to deploy with you so you guys are on the same deployment cycle? I was like, I mean, that would be amazing, so that when I get home, you know, he's home too and I don't have to worry about him deploying again. So they actually made that happen. I was really surprised. First sergeant wasn't happy about it. He's like, why would you tell them that? I'm like, I mean, I don't know. They asked. And he was like, oh, my God. So he was pretty mad that he had to jump through all these hoops to get my husband on the deployment. So I get a hold of my husband in AIT, and I'm like, so you're going to deploy. As soon as you get out of AIT, you're deploying, which he was okay with. He was like, okay, I mean, I'd rather be closer to you in country than just here in the United States doing nothing, and we can be on the same deployment cycle, et cetera. So I went home for R&R around Christmas time. We spent Christmas together, and I spent time with my family, and everything just seemed normal. It just seemed like I hadn't been deployed for 6 months. So then when I go back in January, about a week after I got there, my husband came out as well. So then he was at Camp Phoenix and I was at Camp Dubs, which I frequently visited Camp Phoenix. So when I'd come, I would text him on our Afghan cell phones and be like, hey, I'm at your fob, you know, and then we'd sometimes get to have lunch together or like have coffee or something or talk, so.
Okay, so then you rounded out your year there?
Yeah, so once he got in country, everybody was kind of going on R&R around that time, like all the higher ups. So we had this one convoy that we had to do, and we were shorthanded because everybody was cycling in and out of R&R. So they typically don't let dual military go on convoys together because if the convoy gets hit, they just killed a whole family. So that was the protocol, but we were short-staffed, and the senior NCO was like, I mean, it's a short distance. If you guys are comfortable with it, we'll put you in 2 different trucks. Like, I'll allow it. So I was the lead convoy driver, and then he was the rear gunner. So we actually got to do a convoy together. However, we got our asses reamed when the senior NCOs found out that happened. They were like, you know, you could have killed a whole family, and, you know, that could have been dangerous because if the convoy got hit, you know, they probably would have saved each other before they saved other battle buddies. However, me and my husband were professionals. We knew we would save whoever. We wouldn't, of course, we'd be concerned with each other, but I mean, the mission came first. I mean, that was our marriage motto, was the mission came first.
Oh.
I mean, like unofficially, we didn't, you know, say that, but I mean, every day it was like mission first, you know. So we took our jobs very seriously. But it was cool being able to be on a convoy with him, just like having him close. It was really cool.
Knowing he had a weapon and could protect you.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it was nice.
Okay. So you guys are on the same schedule. You, time's up, time to come home? Everything went relatively smoothly?
Yeah, just the 2 incidents that were significant. We of course had, I guess, a few other, you know, moments that were nerve-wracking, but nothing as significant as the 2 that I had mentioned. So yeah, we didn't lose any guys or females or anybody, any soldiers in our deployment. All 100 of us or 100 plus that deployed all came home together. So that was amazing and rare and really cool. So I was very proud of that our entire battalion came home, especially my guys, all of us being convoy drivers every single day, convoying, especially because sometimes we'd convoy to Bagram, which I said is anywhere from an hour to 3 hours, and you're a huge target traveling all that distance. So I was very proud that I never had any incidents or I didn't get anybody hurt, and that all of our guys came home safe. And again, very patriotic. We came home on July 4th. And me and my husband actually got to fly home together, so that was really cool. We actually sat side by side on the plane and did all of that together. We got in the middle of the night at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and it was kind of cool. People were lined in the streets, like celebrating us coming home. And then we get to the, we go kind of like, I guess it was like behind the airport or something where all of our equipment was, and we kind of debrief. I think we're there for maybe like an hour just debriefing and then telling us how it's going to go, and there's going to be a ceremony and et cetera. So we debrief, so they say, and then we go into the gym for our welcome home ceremony, and I was the guide on, so I was the front of the battalion. And all of our families were there and everything, and that was probably the most overwhelming moment for me, was just coming home and then just being bombarded with family. I hadn't had a chance to readjust my emotions. You know, I'd been on this like ride or die mode, you know, like I got to do this mission, I have to stay alive, I got to keep my guys alive, I can't have any feelings, I can't be scared, I can't worry about at home, I can't worry about if something happens to me, I just have to focus on the mission. And then coming home and transitioning to being that person I used to be that was very outgoing and loving and welcoming, it was really overwhelming. So my kid runs up to me, my mom was there, my sister and my grandmother, and so my kid runs up to me, and I was kind of just, you know, I just wanted to back up, and I almost felt cornered. So it was weird. I wasn't expecting that. I thought that I would, you know, be happy to be home, but actually for, I want to say almost the first 6 months, I was really depressed to be home. I really missed Afghanistan. I missed my guys. I missed my mission. I missed everything. So I was really depressed, and not to mention our unit was disbanding, so everybody was getting sent to different units. I wasn't really, you know, the rank structure took place back home at Fort Sill, so I wasn't allowed to talk to the warrant officer, I wasn't allowed to talk to my first sergeant, you know, so it was just weird. No one was allowed to talk to each other. The medic and I wasn't necessarily in the same company, or we were in the same company but not the same unit. So everybody was just scattered. So I just felt alone and really depressed. I just missed everything about the deployment and the routine and my mission. I felt like I didn't have any significance at home. You know, I'm just kind of walking around and doing whatever someone tells me to do, but there was no concrete mission. So that was a rough transition.
How much longer are you in the military?
So once I got home from Afghanistan, I think, let's see, when did I get out? I got home in 2011. I got home July 2011, and I got out of the military December 28, 2012. So once I got home, I had got sent to a different unit, and I just, like I said, I just hated it. I hated my unit. I hated how things were. I missed Afghanistan. I missed the mission. I missed my job. And not to mention, I was a lot more broken. I had really bad back problems. I couldn't stand up for long periods of time. I had a lot of back pain. I had a lot of migraines and a lot of issues. And so I started seeing doctors for all of that. And then I just realized after 6 months of battling all that, I was just done. So I spent the next year just kind of waiting it out, and then I finally got orders to get out 3 months early for an educational release. So my ETS date was March of 2013, but I actually got out December of 2012, so I was able to get out 3 months early. And I was actually in cosmetology school when I got back from Afghanistan, so I went to night school for cosmetology, and the Army did not like that. They were like, that doesn't relate to the military. And I'm like, okay, so who said it has to, you know, education go toward the military? So they never wanted to let me go to class, especially if we're in the field. They wanted me to just skip cosmetology school, and it's all about hours, so I couldn't miss or I would fail out. So they really hated that. So I'd have to, spend 8 hours at my unit and then leave and go to school and then come home in the middle of the night and then be in the field all night. So I lost a lot of sleep when we were in the field.
Okay. Is there anything you feel like we haven't discussed that you'd like to discuss?
There's so much. I don't know. Not that I can think of.
Is there, what message would you like to leave for anybody that will hear or see this interview in the future?
For one, don't assume you know what a veteran looks like. That's one thing that really bothers me. People don't expect that I'm a veteran, let alone a combat veteran, let alone in the Army. So that really bothers me. You just assume everyone's a veteran, or just don't assume at all. So that would be the biggest message. And I think that society really needs to be a part of the war as well. Know that there's a war going on, know that we're sending people to war, not soldiers. So it's hard coming home and no one knows why you were gone, and everyone's like, oh, you went to Iraq? I'm like, no, Afghanistan. And they're like, yeah, Iraq. So I mean, educate yourselves on a war if a war is going on, and be aware of people that you're talking to. So that's about it.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time today and this interview. This concludes the interview with Loghan Young at Wright State University.